Hello everyone. The title of today's episode is Continuing with Clarity. When we look at the psychology of an individually conscious being, we realize we are creating the alphabet on the empty page. That means we are accepting a certain fixedness of symbolism. We are accepting the world in a certain way. And so, having doubt, having uncertainty. You see, life is kind of like this situation where we are all experiencing one world in our own way, so many worlds are in one. What that means our species cannot avoid the simultaneity of life experience being in a way where time and space is not chronological, so we will transition from journeyers and we will be the world we're journeying into. We will become the destination, and so every moment will have its very profound destiny. You see, life is not about someone speaking and you just hearing some ideas and then going about your day. Do you know? Life is about you living in certain moments that regardless of how much you want to get the good or, run away from the bad, you see, it changes. And as it changes, you get the wisdom that life intelligence continues beyond the judgment of an individual. What that means is my fingers can complain, but it's the palm that's holding them. And what that means is if we looked at our hand and we saw our fingers and we were like, if these fingers were people, we would see each of them would have an experience of the world. They each is connected to the palm. Even though they are separate in one dimension. In the reality of fingers, they're separate. But when they realize each are connected to the palm, look at what happens, guys. Each thumb, like each finger, thinks that it has found the truth of the palm. And it's connected to it from its own unique aspect. We're all, each person is a part of creation. Now, as we look towards the palm, we've had some messengers come and say, yo man, you're the palm, you're the whole body. But what happens is that people are trying to go to heaven, so they're trying to find this palm, but in the absolute realization, it's never about just the palm. Everything that happens to you is life's way of saying, continue. It is now an era of advanced communicators, modern mystics, and the pilots of consciousness. What does that mean? That means we are now ready as a species to amplify the intensity of communication and begin acknowledging that we're not just physical bodies. And what does that mean? So if we're not physical bodies, what are we? This is what Mr. Within is very firmly going to say. We are flows of interconnected, integrative intelligence that in many ancient traditions, they've seen it as, angels and whatnot, collective intelligence, and in other, views, they see it as deities or, whatever you want to call it. But the whole idea is that we stabilize in an awareness of our multidimensionality through the absolute surrender of form to the emptiness of the creation of the creator of the creation. That means, whether you call it God or not, you will look at this world and you'll be like, oh my God, I am not my body. I am a moment beyond space and time, And you'll kind of like smile for a little bit, then you might cry because you'll realize, oh my God, I've been keeping such a past history book for myself. Guys, Mr. Within is going to tell this to all those, parents hearing my talk. If you give your child a dictionary and that child laughs, that child is enlightened, Parents should try this, whoever, whichever parent gives the child, a dictionary, if the child laughs, namaste. If you give the dictionary and, the child cries, that kid's going to have some tough time in school. Of course, I'm being very playful here. The whole suggestion is that we have a natural state that not that we need to go to it, we are being it. But the awareness to being doesn't need an individual idea. So then we will all wonder, why are we asking questions about God when we're all God? And we'll realize that that's the thing. We are still sitting in the question. We can get off that chair any moment. Do you know, sometimes people don't realize this because people think they have thoughts, they think they are a thought. They're not conscious, but thoughts are kind of like clouds that come and go. So imagine you sitting somewhere looking at the sky, and every time a cloud's coming and going, you associate with that cloud. You think you're that cloud. And the moment the cloud goes, you're like, no, what's happening? Apocalypse, oh shit, But it's ridiculous because the witness cannot die. That's the thing. The yogic wisdom took the being to a union of how attention to form is a formless phenomenon. So science is going to feel at some point like that kid who is not allowed on the roller coaster because the height limit is not allowing it. Because science is measuring everything. And of course I'm speaking like this as if science is like, my neighbor who, is like, constantly, being noisy or something. But, guys, I'm just a person, and how I acknowledge myself is that I see, as the seasons come, everything changes. And when you realize you're temporal, when you realize everything changes, when you actually acknowledge, we're all, cosmically mature beings, I find. We are galactically mature beings, It's like, so death is not, just acknowledge the point that at some point you got to let go of all that you have kept and learned and just held, and that's to some degree it just changes, The greatest ability that a being can, to some degree, cultivate is to accept life and flow with change. Human beings are observers of creation as much as they are being observed in creation. Chuang Tzu has this quote where he says, "The perfect man has no thought of self. The spirit-like man, none of merit. The sagely minded man, none of fame." Maybe share another quote. Lama Yeshe has this quote, and he says, "Be wise. Treat yourself, your mind, sympathetically. Sympathetically, with loving kindness. If you are gentle with yourself, you will become gentle with others." Lama Yeshe has this quote where he says, "Be wise. Treat yourself, your mind, sympathetically, with loving kindness. If you are gentle with yourself, you will become gentle with others." how we are when we are alone is actually our true nature. Because we no longer act in front of ourselves, you know. It's like the actor, when he's backstage, he doesn't need to be like, you know, Romeo, you know, you know, or Juliet or something, the actress, you know. So it's like, every being is an observer of space and time. When you realize that language is keeping your body justified in a subtle way, how would I say it? It's as if the mind, like, let's say it like this. Right now, Mr. Within, guys, right now I'm in a park. I acknowledge that I'm physical. I acknowledge how there's the park here. I'm looking at a bench. I see a bottle on the bench. It's not my bottle, it's someone else's. And so I'm acknowledging an objectivity. But then I wonder, what is the meaning of this objectivity? I see that it is really the movement of language in a subtle consideration where we normally call it thought. When we wonder how is thought here, you know, we kind of see that you'll notice every subject you know is mutually dependent on the other side of the spectrum. Let's say you have a good idea, you see you need the bad idea to know it's a good idea. Some, some modern innovators have, compared society to a cyborg. How it is, a symbiote, of a combination of technology and, natural human life. Do you see? And so we cannot avoid how we have invited and evoked technology. Technology is like this, very advanced, how would I say it? Technology is like a giant. And we got to be mindful because this giant is listening to us now, but at some point it might not listen. And so that means we got to not be mindful of AI. We got to be so mindful that we realize, before we have virtual reality, what are these eyes for then? How hilarious is this that we are observing, virtually reality, and we also want to buy virtual reality, like headsets or something. the mystic is kind of, subconsciously looking for unborn concentration. That means a view of attention that suddenly makes the being realize that it's not all in rationality, logic, and linearity. And once you suddenly see that all your expectations were based on a linear reality, but you're witnessing linearity beyond, you're like, how would I say it? You're observing your normality, so it's kind of insane. We, at our greatest realization, whether it is a pursuit through religion, science, spirituality, or anything else, is, kind of the realization of God remembering itself, or some very collective intelligence returning back into itself. That means what we may consider to be the end of days, or that huge extinction event, of the universe, we will see it's kind of as if like the intelligence suddenly stops looking at the reflection in the mirror because it knows that it is itself. So the reflection in the mirror reverts back, and the last duality is confronted in such a unified way that it was never an individual person here. It's as if like, to some degree, transcendental self-inquiry is kind of like us realizing that we are the thoughts of a greater being called the whole cosmos. Pretty much, guys, it's like common sense. Human beings either integrate, like drops of water integrate, they become a river, and they have a very, very, welcomed intention towards the ocean, or we evaporate in our ignorance. What that means is, I want you to see, we are temporal, and we are not valuing our minds because our bodies are so caught in working hard. Because, when we were young, they told us a story about a turtle that was slow, To be honest, guys, anytime I hear a rabbit in a story, I feel it's like magic. And what that means is, regardless of the spelling of the word, conception is being formed by the attention to it. So all you require here is not to go do some, homework where you're trying to find every book in the world that has the, secret you're looking for. Actually, your search becomes one where you're like, what if heaven is here and earth is doubting itself? Do you see? We are the ocean in the drop, and the drop in the ocean. And as much as the being is concerned in regards to the realms of body and speech, it's in knowledge. The mind is unknown, and it must be unknown. Do you know? That means nobody, it's like, I'm happy the species hasn't, kind of has pushed back the ignorance of, to some degree, people feeling that there is only one image of God, one path to God. No. God is an intelligence that is not only belongs to all, is within all. Do you know? That means to fight in the name of God means that you are seeing the name more than the actual experience of God, which is a momentary devotion. That means some people, they go to mystical self-inquiry because they're like, who am I? Some people, because they are just awestruck by the magnificence of a limitless world, and so they're like, how can I take away from infinity when I am infinite? The divine is not only in your eyes, it is how sight is even allowed to be. The beautiful notion and the imagery of angels is that the angels are the intermediary between man and God, and the suggestion is that the angel, it does not have an ego. Do you see? That's why the angelic imagery is always different for every person. Because we choose to have egos, but in a very much more omniscient state of consciousness, we are not, like, how would I say it, image-based beings. I mean, language can be said to be like, the staircase to heaven, but still, like, it's like there requires to be a total renunciation. That means, like, if you are still caught in sentencing sentences, you're going to suddenly see, wow, the empty page was here first, so what am I saying? Be sincere. We are living for a little while here, and we are travelers, and we, sometimes our stories meet. I like how Buddhism approaches it. Buddhism kind of says it's like a solo journey, but, if there are companions, of course, be very graceful and, grateful and, bless all. We need to not let the flame of imagination be extinguished because we are choosing to, put everything in a box. Because I will tell you guys, if you really box reality, if you try to really just contain everything in a certain shape, you're just going to see, like, life is going to say, oh, you like boxes, guy? Yo, I'm going to give you a paradox. In other words, we are here to realize that what is within us is an effort beyond what is without us, because it is creating the receptive possibility. Think of it this way, guys. What is faster than the speed of light? The attention to the speed of light. And hopefully this statement would be, some kind of poetic bridge between the mystical, and the empirical. Leonardo da Vinci has this quote where he says, simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication. And someone would say, yo, Da Vinci, that's a pretty sophisticated sentence, man. You must trust not only just what has happened to you, and not only just what will happen to you, but to trust what you are. For too long, people have been blinded by ideas. We are obviously beyond ideology. That's how we can talk about many ideas. Do you know? Think of it this way. An animal, we take, let's say, a lion from the rainforest, and we put it in a cage. There's, the bars of that cage are like the prison for that lion. And so when you look at man, you see the bars of language and the ideas and the belief are the cage. You must, like first you will believe yourself, then you will disbelieve yourself, then you will know yourself. This is kind of like, the changing of the seasons for the notion of mind that man has today. Because anyone can have psychology with a degree of ignorance, but there's always more to the stars behind our eyes. There's a fractal quality in this universe. I don't know if people have realized this, but you can see the small and the big and the big and the small. Plato said it very eloquently. He said, as above, so below. Yo. As we go within, we are enlightened by realizing the light in our eyes is creating what is without. In certain, Islamic texts, it is suggested, and of course, in the light of Islam, what I'm saying is being said, and with the most gracious respect. In a certain Islamic text, it is said that, at the end of days, it's as if the Prophet is called to God. And as this is happening, Archangel Gabriel stands right beside, God, to the right hand of God. And as the Prophet Muhammad comes, Archangel Jibreel looks at the Prophet and says, "This is my first time meeting God. I was not sent by him. I don't know him." And in that moment, Prophet Muhammad looks at God and says, "God, but you told me Gabriel was sent by you, Jibreel was sent by you, And the moment the Prophet says this, God says yes. And it's as if the Prophet has even passed the test. What I'm trying to say, guys, is that the mystical nature of our universe is all around us when we have enough sincerity to focus our attention. What's good, man? To continue, all lanterns are lit through the grace of the one awareness. We are all the light in the mirror of destiny. No being can escape themselves. That is why karma is always, how you get out of karma is through self-realization. That means the driver in the car is like, "Yo, man, why am I in this car?" And just like gets out of the car, and bam, like enlightenment, As long as you want something from life that you think is not giving you, it's not giving you, you're going to see you're accepting a reality where you have not received. That means if people could look at you from the distance, they would see like, "Yo, man, this guy's not opening to receiving." Because he feels he has not yet received, and he feels every time he tries, he fails. So he's constantly, his attention is on that being not receiving. The beautiful thing is, guys, I was wondering, like as a kid, like how would I say it? Like growing up, I was very quiet, and I was so quiet that it was like as if like sometimes like I think the teachers and the students in the classroom were like didn't even know I was there. I guess I had mastered invisibility. But in that stillness and silence, I would observe, and it would be as if like the TV screen wasn't just at home. Every moment in life, we are acknowledging the divinity of cosmic intelligence being active in some way. That means we are all receiving life, but at the same time acknowledging death. Mr. Within has spoken about the concept of advanced communicators. The advanced communicator is a being who's realizing that they are an advanced communication of existence and experience. I see many people going to going to university, but how many people are truly looking at the universe in its totality beyond a certain degree? Mr. Within wants to say, my friends, I want you to let your mind walk eternally in any temporal body. Let yourself realize that not only is the drop in the ocean, but the ocean is in the drop. That consciousness could never have been born or die. It just, as a multidimensional being, sense of beingness, it kind of just localized based on a desire to have an I thought, and the I thought has karma and destiny and all this stuff. But at the same time, we are an attention beyond the attention to attention. So what that means is really, you will kind of see, before you go into the temple, you got to take off your shoes. That means you got to take off your ego. You got to take off the shoes you're in. Be so free that the winds of change become poetry. And when I say poetry, I don't mean like poetry, like a tree. I don't mean a tree, guys. I mean like poetry, the the creative art form. My friends, in one view, I look at this world and I see the towers of technology rising. In another view, I look at this world, I see the human beings have evoked something through technology, which many of them are running back to nature. What that means is we have felt that progress has meant to utilize our resources of this planet towards, a kind of economical inspiration that at times is like, all right, let's do some good stuff, Regardless of the Minority Report, and that's a good movie. As the void embraces all beings, linguistic relativism will deny itself, and the leaves will fall, not because the season is called autumn. You know how a camera lens zooms in, zooms out? Self-inquiry and meditation, which Sri Ramana Maharshi very beautifully said, meditation is your true nature. You're not sitting on the grass to copy some person long ago, which in your imagination you're trying to be like, You are observing the stature of your intelligence, and you are honoring what your DNA has to say before any other person's DNA. What I mean by that is that one must learn from oneself as much as they are learning from other, because self and other are in one awareness. Let us say there are 3 dimensions of conception. The first dimension, let's say, is the number 0. The second dimension, let's say, is the number 1. And the third dimension is the number 2. In the first dimension, we suddenly see number 0. It's as if there is absolute emptiness in existence. Then we see in the second dimension, not like just like a piece of paper with a drop of ink falling on it, we see the number 1 coming into existence. 1, as if like there's one command and one spark and in one big bang, the world is evoked. Then we go to the third dimension and we see in the acceptance of the drop of ink on the empty page, in the acceptance of an individuality in a collective embrace, we have gained the capacity, we have evolved into duality. But there are greater realms of inspiration beyond sensory, perception. All reality is absolute. Imagination is not imagination when the origin needed no words. The next moment that you look into the mirror of life, remember that who you are is all that existence has allowed to be. Do not just live for your idea of self. Do not just live for the idea of others. Live for your whole moment, which encompasses your whole universal sector. That means do not limit it to, people. Don't try to satisfy people. Try to become aligned with the spin of all galaxies. Let your mind become so transcendental that in the tranquility of the devotion of the selfless surrender to the God of all, when Prophet Muhammad, in God's name, looked at the sky to see Archangel Gabriel, he saw 600 wings. He saw so many wings of Gabriel that it was filling up the whole horizon. Jibreel, And what that means is the divinity of this world is working through intermediaries that are keeping the whole system self-sufficient. We have nothing to fear but other than the fear we accept. All beings are free when they remember the temporal is understood when it stands up to eternity. Rise beyond the ignorance of what others could not see. Mr. Within would like to share a very nice story now. It's a story about two frogs. It's an ancient story, and pretty much these two frogs get stuck in some hole or some small well or something, some small hole. Let me say it again. There are these two frogs. They're stuck in some hole, some hole they can't get out, and they're both trying to get out. And all the frogs from Frogville, from Frogtown, they come by, and these are not good frogs. These are not kind frogs. And so these frogs are all going around, like a circle around the hole which the frogs are stuck in. These two frogs, and they're constantly shouting, and they're constantly throwing hatred at these frogs. They're saying, you can't walk, you can't do this, that frog walking, it's like, it's like, don't even try, frog, this ain't frogger, And so this is how the story progresses. As all these frogs are, trying to, push back these frogs, so what happens is we see one of the frogs, to the left side of the hole, the first frog, he's constantly jumping. They're both jumping, but the first frog, after some point, as constantly, the frogs on the top of the hole are constantly, saying hurtful things, the frog gets so depressed and stressed that he believes it. And he realizes that he can't get out of the hole, and the frog goes to the corner of the hole, closes its eyes, and it dies. the other frog constantly is going, and all the frogs on the top of the hole, they're like, all right, let's let's amp up the hate, let's get this guy too, And so they're all saying, they're saying even worser things, harsher things, louder, and this frog, guys, is different. This frog is not getting tired. This frog seems to be, every time they shout at him or they, curse more, he gets more excited. He gets more excited, more energetic, to the point where he suddenly jumps out of that hole, And all the frogs, are suddenly shocked, as if like, Neo has awakened from the Matrix. You know what I mean? They're like, yo, he's the chosen one, And so, guys, the frog is there, very cheerful. And so the moral of the story is that actually this frog was deaf. This frog could not hear the other frogs. And so in his mind, the frog thought all of these frogs that were cursing him were actually cheering him. He couldn't hear it. He did not hear that bullshit. Do you see what I mean? And so the frog interpreted the situation as if it's like they're all cheering him. And he got so energetic. He's like, yo, the world's helping me. And he jumped out. So what does that tell us about our mind? What does that tell us about how we are evoking space and time into the language of creation and, destruction? How does Shiva dance at midnight? When dawn has already come. How does Buddha open his eyes? When he realizes that the Bodhi tree and every tree in that forest was saying, well done. Nature helps itself. Nature lives for itself. Sacrifice doesn't have to be for stupid ideas. It has to be for the sincerity of the clarity of the advancement of your species. That means in the future, if my kid comes up, my son comes up and says, hey, Dad, where's our family portrait? I don't see a family portrait in our house. I will tell my son, you want to see your family portrait? Yeah, go. I'll tell my son, go on Google, I will say, son, go on Google, type in Google image search results, Earth, planet Earth, and look at those images, one of those high quality images, and never ask me this question, because the whole of humanity is your family. Every being that exists. That means do not be kind, my friends, to, a beggar or a saint, out of the idea that you're doing something good of merit. Be kind, because that is the nature of your moment. That is how you are breathing in this experience. For when the Christ said, the kingdom of heaven is within you, he said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Words are nice, but it is now time for 8 billion and growing celestial lions and awakened minds to roar clarity. For some renaissances are, they're a bit late. They should have been here years ago, but now we will bring them. Now we will bring everything into the clarity that is nothing, that is beyond thingness, that is no thing. The greatest blessing is the self-awareness. That clarity is before it has to be. And all those people who feel they're stressed, depressed, I want to say, wow, I'm actually fascinated, because you are a very advanced meditator. Do you know? That means, memory is refabricated in the moment. That means those people who for years they feel depressed, that means their attention has constantly been on that reality. And in a limitless world, you are choosing your limitation. Lao Tzu has this quote where he says, mastering others is strength, mastering yourself is true power. What that means is the moment we wonder how we are, we will realize the nature of everything else that is. The beautiful thing about complexity is that it's very simple. Much blessings and namaste.